All right, good morning, you guys. Welcome to those of you here in person and joining us on live stream. Thank you, team, for that wonderful video. I loved hearing the stories that were shared. And I know that this day comes and it means a lot of different things for a lot of different people. So if it is a hard day for you, I want you to know that we're going to be here after service to pray with you and to encourage you. We want to stand with you in this time. So with that being said, happy Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day. You guys, my name is Heather, and I have the great honor and privilege of leading our student ministry here at HighPoint Church. It's our middle schoolers and our high schoolers, as well as our missions department. And so I'm excited to be here with you guys to share. Now, I know we have moms of human children in this room today, but where are my dog moms in this place? Yes. What about cat moms, if you're not a dog person? All right, what about plant moms? I know that's a thing after this pandemic. All right, less of those. There were more in the 9:15 service. So I myself am a mother of two awesome, strong boys, but I am also a dog mom. And so a thing that has to do with dog moms is dog moms help other dog moms out, right? So like when we go out of town, we have friends that are there to help us. So I have some friends who decided to go out of town for the weekend, and they have two dogs. So I have one dog, they have two. I figure what's adding two more, right? So they brought them over, and there's one specific thing about one of these dogs, and that is that this dog is the kind of dog that will eat anything and everything off of your counter. All right, you guys know those dogs I'm talking about. So I made a mental note that anything that is on my counter that remotely has a scent, has any type of smell, it could be lotion, it could be a candle, it can be a magazine photo of food, and this dog will conquer that food off of the counter. So I made a mental note that I need to push everything back. So the first night, my son Gage and I had ordered pizza, and we were in the other room eating our pizza, and we hear the cardboard box go crashing to the tile floor in my kitchen. And so I run around, go into my kitchen, only to find this dog, who I will keep nameless to protect her innocence, but Kaya Roberts had pasta and sauce all over her face. The pizza was gone. You know, dogs don't chew things, they just swallow them. So literally almost everything was gone. And our leftovers for the next day are gone, and I had a disappointed little boy about that. But so we clean everything up. The next day, I'm going to pick my son Gage up from school, and I'm letting him know, hey, we are going to a movie today after school. Now, when we get home, I'm going to need you to get out of the car really fast, which you know this is a challenge with kids. Get out of the car really fast. When we get home, we are going to give the dogs food. We're going to give them water. We're going to let them out, and we are going to need to book it to this movie because otherwise we are going to be late. And so we pull in our driveway. I walk up to the front door. I open the door, and heat hits me from inside of my house. And for those of you who live in Florida, you know that this is generally not a good thing. Usually this means that your AC is, number one, either completely broken or it is not working correctly, and you're going to be sweating for the next couple of days. And so, but as I take a couple further steps, I think, hold on a second, there's not dogs coming up to greet me here. Nobody's jumping on me, and instantly my heart sinks. And I'm thinking, my friends entrusted me with their children at this point, and I have completely failed them. Where are these dogs? And so I go to the back patio, and the door is wide open. Wide open. There are no dogs to be found. We look in the backyard, there's no dogs. In the side yard, there's no dogs. The gate to the fence is open because these Houdini dogs escaped from it, still don't know how to this day. I'm like, Gage, let's go. We're going to get in the car, and we are driving road after road after road through my neighborhood. No dogs. And so we get to the entrance of my neighborhood, and I roll down the window, and I ask this lady standing there, any chance you have seen any dogs run by here? And she's like, actually, there was two of them that took off that way. Of course, it's into traffic, right? So we speed that way. We see them down the road. I'm seeing them running in and out of traffic. Literally, their life and my life is flashing before my eyes. How am I going to tell my friend this? And so we get to them about 20 minutes later. We kind of corner them pick them up, and throw them in my car. And by the way, side note, when I got out and called their names, Kaya, Kennedy, do you think they came running to me? No, because that's not what dogs do when they're free. And so anyways, we got them in the car, we got back home, only to find that we had missed the movie by about 20 minutes. And so I had a very disappointed little boy, but I had dogs. I was able to give them back. And I don't know about you, but maybe you've had one of those days. Or maybe you have had one of those years in a global pandemic where school looks different, life looks different, everything in your home looks different. Or maybe for you, that disappointment comes in the form of not winning your championship game, or ordering your steak medium rare and it coming to your table medium well, which is, in my opinion, not great. Or maybe the Packers lost their game and did not make it to the to the Super Bowl. Anybody in here? Your team didn't make it and you're disappointed. Or maybe you thought a conversation was going to go one way and it went completely the other way. Or maybe you went to your favorite restaurant on Mother's Day afternoon and they have that giant container of like 276 different types of soda, and you walk up to it and yours is the only one that is out and not there. Or maybe you've just had one of those days where everybody annoys you, nothing goes wrong, everything is thing after thing after thing. Or maybe for you, it's more life-changing disappointments. Like maybe you thought you'd be married by now, and there are no prospects in sight. Or maybe you're trying to conceive and trying to have a baby, and you're unable to conceive in that moment. Or maybe you've lost your mom or your parents or your best friend. Or maybe you didn't get the job. Maybe you didn't get the A. Maybe you didn't make the grades you needed to, and you didn't get into the college of your choice. Or maybe you have a diagnosed illness that you are facing right now. Or maybe your child is making decisions that you didn't raise them to make. The reality is we all face disappointment, and those are real and those are heavy. But let me tell you, God is working on your behalf behind the scenes, and in those times, we have an important choice to make. We're going to jump into the book of Ruth today, and if you haven't read through the book of Ruth, I want to encourage you to do that. There's a lot of really, really powerful things in there, but today we're going to focus on a woman by the name of Naomi. So Ruth chapter 1, verse 1 through 2 says, "In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. So a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech, his wife's name was Naomi, and the names of his two sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem, Judah, and they went to Moab, and they lived there." And now a little context for this story. This story takes place in the time of the judges. This was a very dark time in Israel. And during this time, the judges ruled, and the people lived for about 350 years under complete chaos. So here we have Elimelech, Naomi, Mahlon, and Chilion. And if any of you are looking for any baby names, this book is stacked with them this morning. Names had a great deal of significance in this time, so we can learn and gain a lot of insight into this family just by looking at what their names mean. So Elimelech's name literally means, "My God is king." Naomi means pleasantness or sweetness. So it'd be like if we called Pastor Keith super tall, or we called Miss Melissa child extraordinaire, okay? Names meant something in this time. So what a happy couple they must have been. We have a boy who loves the Lord and seeks after him in his life and marries the sweetest, most pleasant girl in town. Can you imagine what they had hoped for, what they had dreamed for, what they had hoped to accomplish together? And so these two wonderful, amazing people have kids, and we would like to think and hope that they have amazing and wonderful kids too, but not this time. Because Mahlon and Chilion's names literally mean unhealthy and sickly. And Naomi had hoped for strong boys, and instead she got sick and weak. And a famine struck, so they had no food for their boys, and they didn't know what to do. And so we don't know the details. We don't know if they agreed on this decision. We don't know if they just went along with it. But they made a very bad decision to leave a place where God had called them to and move into enemy territory. And we're going to look and we're going to see that this decision ended up costing them in more ways than you can imagine. And this is where disappointment begins. This was not a move from Ocoee to Winter Garden or Winter Garden to Windermere. This wasn't a move from one great place to another. This was a move from a place of God's choosing and blessing to a place where they literally invited God's punishment upon themselves. Moab was a pagan land with foreign gods. It was full of idol worshipers who sometimes sacrificed their own children to their false god. Imagine the type of neighborhood that this must have been. These are people God had banned from coming into his presence, but Naomi and her family are living here among them now. This was playing with fire when God had called his people to be separate from the surrounding areas, and that they had taken matters into their own hands. We see Elimelech and Naomi escaping from something that seems bad, and they step into something that was even worse and only continues to become worse. And my question for you here is, have you ever been struggling in a place and you think you can make it better, and you completely disregard God, and in doing that, you actually make it worse? The truth is that sometimes our temporary reactions become permanent responses. We see Naomi and Elimelech escaping from a bad situation only to find themselves and their family in a tragically worse spot. What you choose to run to when life isn't great will determine what you grow into. You can run to the forbidden areas and the forbidden lands that surround, or you can hold on tightly to God, and you can hold on to the easy fix, or you can hold tightly onto the Father. Because if you don't hold on to God, what happens? It just makes it worse every time. You can hold on to Jesus even when you don't see what he's doing, because what you hold on to is what you grow into. That thing that captivates you determines the direction that you go. And so we see Elimelech and Naomi choose their direction straight into a place that God has forbidden them to go. Have you ever watched anybody do this before? Watched them turn into a direction that they know they're not supposed to go, that God says no to go, and they walk straight into it. So it's almost impossible for me to describe to you guys how wicked and evil the people of Moab were as they served their false gods. Okay, later in the word, Moab is referred to as a wash basin, which means if I have dirty feet and I need to wash my feet, I'm washing my feet in Moab. Other translations read scrubbing pot or sludge bucket, which is my personal favorite. I'll let you choose and get your own mental picture of what God really felt about Moab. So what did Naomi do? She left where she was supposed to be, headed in the wrong direction towards enemy territory. Here she is away from everyone she knows, trying to survive famine with 2 sick children, and Elimelech dies. Her husband dies. Disappointment, to say the least. And considering how God felt about Moab, you can imagine that he had put some rules into place. And one of the rules that God had put into place was he had forbidden the Hebrews to intermarry with the Moabites. So in this natural disappointment streak fashion, both of Naomi's sons, not one, but both of them go on to marry women from the sludge bucket that they were living in, instead of returning to Bethlehem and find Israelite wives. And we see more disappointment, another huge disappointment that Naomi is faced with. And then going from really bad to far worse, not one, but two of her sons die. These are major, traumatic, tragic life events, more major, life-changing disappointment, if that's even what we want to call it anymore. And she's left with two pagan daughters-in-law. Disappointment after disappointment after disappointment. And you know this feeling? When it just seems like thing after thing after thing, and you just can't catch a break. And I don't mean just a dog eating pizza that you wanted for the next day. I mean major, major life disappointment. Check this out for a second. Put yourself in Naomi's shoes. What problems do you have if you are in her shoes? Number one, you are a stranger in a foreign land. You have no family, no clan, no tribe to protect you. Number two, you have no husband, and therefore no companion to share your life with. Number three, you have no means of support. A widow's children would normally be the ones who supported her, but you have no children. And number four, you have no child and no heir. In those days, a woman without a child was to be pitied above all others, and perhaps most tragic, Elimelech's lineage would disappear from the earth. And what began as a temporary journey to escape hardship became a decade of disappointment. Because sometimes our temporary reactions become permanent responses. So later on in this story, about 10 years later, Naomi decides to go back home to Bethlehem and live out her days as a poor widow, and she begs her daughters-in-laws to go back to their families. One of them did, one of them did not. She stayed with her. And Naomi is broken in this place. She's confused. She doesn't know where God is. And I know I've felt like that at times in my life, and I'm sure you have as well. Verse 19 goes on to say, so the two women went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the women exclaimed, can this be Naomi? Don't call me Naomi, she told them. Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me. So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, arriving in Bethlehem as the barley harvest was beginning. As you can imagine, her life and her reality has changed quite a bit since she's been home. She returned home a completely different person from the pleasant and sweet person that she once was. And let's look at this. Verse 19 says, when they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the women exclaimed, can this be Naomi? Can this really be our Naomi? Now, let me tell you, this isn't like in a positive way, like, Naomi, we haven't seen you in forever. You look great. Like, you have not aged at all. The Instagram filter you're using is perfect. Like, you don't even need any filters. Like, you are beautiful. Like, are you sleep? This is not in a positive way. It was more of like, can this really be Naomi? She looks horrible. She looks horrible. Like, has she been sleep? Like, what in the world have you gone through? And I gotta imagine that this is like finding that person from your high school years on Facebook that looks nothing like they used to. Maybe it's the person who swore up and down that they would never have kids, and just yesterday they had a birth announcement of like, kid number 8 on the way, ready to go, lap is full with children. Or maybe it's the person who had the mullet. Now, I don't know where y'all grew up, but I grew up in Wisconsin, and there was mullets in Wisconsin. And maybe this one person had like business in the front, party in the back, and now they are business all around. And you're going, is that the same person? Like, is that the same person? They said, can this be our Naomi? Can this be Naomi? And she says, don't call me Naomi, she told them. Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life bitter. And you know how you get that text message, and there are lots of different ways to interpret text messages. Maybe there's an emoji, and if there's not an emoji, then they must be upset at you, or if there's an exclamation point, well, then they're happy with you, or if it's in all caps, it's like, why are you yelling at me? We have different ways of interpreting text messages, or it's like how when you tell your children or your friends, like it's not quite the words that you're saying, but it's the tone and how you're saying them that I have an issue with. I imagine this in a certain tone. Don't call me Naomi. I don't hear this as, hey, so about that Naomi name, like, can you please not call me Naomi anymore? That's really not who. I hear her saying, don't call me Naomi. The pleasantness of her life had become bitter, and she had lost everything that she counted as precious. And we see Naomi holding on to something here that is not God. In fact, she blames God. Think about this. She's been away from her home, away from God's calling, out of God's will for 10 years. And because she was away from the things of God, it changed how she saw God, which then changed how she saw life. And that brought her to the conclusion that God had made her life bitter. It's all God's fault. God let me down. God didn't do what he should have done, and that may be where some of you are right now. Without even knowing it, you've gotten off of the right trajectory and you're headed in the wrong direction, straight into Moab. We see Naomi holding on to disappointment and bitterness, and remember, what you hold on to is what you grow into. We talked about how names were important. Well, she renamed herself Mara, which in the Hebrew origin literally means bitter. So what she's saying is, don't call me pleasant, call me bitter. Don't call me pleasant anymore. And oh, you guys, bitterness is an ugly, ugly thing. You guys, it goes deep. Sometimes when we're bitter, we don't even realize it because we've gotten really good at managing it. Or we think we've gotten really good at managing it, and we've allowed it to sit there and wreak havoc on our souls. When we're bitter. Now, I know that there are no bitter people in here this morning, right? No bitter people? No bitter people in here this morning, I know. But just in case, when we're bitter, we justify our bitterness, all right? So what I mean by that is, after what that person did to me, I have every right to be angry. Because can you believe what they did to me? I deserve to be angry. I have a right to be angry because of what they did. And many of us were bitter, and we justify it because we were a victim, and we think we have the right to stay upset and to stay mad and to stay bitter. Sometimes when we're bitter, we become overly critical. You know, if you're bitter against somebody, it's highly unlikely that you will ever look at that person objectively again if you continue to remain bitter. And what I mean by this is, maybe your spouse hurt you one time, or your friend hurt you one time, and everything that they do, you pick them apart. They can do nothing right. Even if they do something that's really good, you find the need to pick them apart, and you pick them apart, and you pick them apart because you're bitter. Sometimes when we're bitter, we secretly celebrate other people's misfortunes. Again, I know nobody in this room, but if I'm bitter at somebody and something bad happens to them, well, I mean, the Bible says, like, God's just evening the score. You know, you reap what you sow, and you're reaping right now what you sow, and you secretly, or not so secretly, celebrate their misfortunes. Have you ever found yourself doing any of these? Maybe you haven't, or you think you haven't, but have you ever been at that job for 10 years and the young buck comes in and gets that promotion? Or maybe for you growing up, your parents had a favorite, and that favorite was clearly not you. And maybe you're single and you really feel like you deserve to be married and you're bitter with God, or you know that group project, and I'm going to dig up some stuff for all of us in here, that group project that you did all the work for and somebody else got all of the credit, or Walmart on a Saturday afternoon. First of all, why? Don't do that to yourself. But you walk in there, and they have, 63 lanes, but only 3 of them are open. Like, why in the world do you spend the money and pay to have 63 lanes available, all of these things there for somebody to check out, and there's only 3 people, you guys, 3 people, and you wait for an hour. Now, I'm not bitter. You know what I'm saying? I'm not bitter. But you're not bitter, right? I know, you're over it, and you don't care, or it doesn't bother you anymore, or you've put it behind you. Oh, but it just might be there, and you might think bitterness isn't a big deal, but it is. And so when I work, you guys, I have a laptop, and oftentimes I am also using a pen and paper, those things that you can still use outside of just electronics. And so I usually have my laptop, and then I have a pen and paper, and I'm writing down and taking notes. And so we had a staff meeting one day, and I was doing just that, and I had to leave pretty quickly from it. So I took my laptop, my screen, and I put it down. And as I was doing that, I heard a crunch. Now, I'm sure you know that sound, a crunch, is not a desirable sound when you have anything to do with laptops or there's any type of electronics in the place. And so I opened up my laptop screen only to find the most beautiful piece of artwork I've ever seen in my life. All of the colors were miraculous on my completely cracked and destroyed screen. And it got that way from a pen that I had left in my laptop. I closed it down. It was completely shattered. And did you know it costs almost as much to change, like to actually just switch out the computer screen as it does to get a new laptop? It's not pretty. The picture was kind of pretty for a moment, but it was completely dysfunctional. And now fast forward to about a week ago, I was going to pick up my son from school, and in typical mother fashion, I had way too many things in my arms, including my laptop. And so in an effort to not drop my laptop, I placed it on top of my car so that I wouldn't drop it while I was getting everything in my car. Okay. So I pull out, everything goes in my car. I pull away. 5 minutes later, I'm going 55 miles an hour down the road, about 5 minutes away from my house. And I hear a big thump on the top of my car. And I'm like, what the heck? Like, we live in the country. Maybe it's a tree. I really don't know. And I look in my rearview mirror and I see my laptop rolling in the street behind me. Literally, there was gravel, like a gravel in front of it, and I was like, I could not believe that I literally just did that. I turned my car around, I go back, I find my laptop literally in the ditch, and it is open about yay high, and I go and I run and I pick it up, and there's gravel all over inside of the keyboard, and I turn it on and I go to enter in my password, and would you know, can somebody please tell me how there is not a single crack in my screen after my computer had flopped down the road at 55 miles an hour, but there's somehow, after this small thing, a pen on my keyboard, my entire screen is cracked. I will be here after service if you can tell me how that happens. But that is like bitterness, y'all. Bitterness is that small thing in there that you think is not going to be a big deal, that you think is gone, and it destroys everything. And sometimes it's that little thing more than the big, traumatic, life-tumbling event that you face, or disappointment or hurt that you face. It's that little thing that'll destroy you. It'll destroy you. Oh, bitterness. What you hold on to is what you grow into, what you focus on. Your little tiny annoyances, they build up and they affect what you grow into. They affect who you grow into, and they affect how people see you. Is this our Naomi? Is this our Naomi? They didn't even recognize her. She got bitter based on disappointment, but the reality is that she shouldn't have gone in the first place. She shouldn't have fled. She shouldn't have escaped when things got bad, and she should have trusted God and held on to him. She was to be blessed in Bethlehem, and she went toward enemy territory in Moab. She renamed herself bitter. Don't rename yourself bitter. Don't choose to grab on and hold on tightly to that thing that you know isn't God. Hold on to God tightly. Hold on to the Father and let him do what he needs to do, what only he can do. Hold on to God, and what we hold on to matters. You guys, if we hold on to unforgiveness, it destroys relationships. If we hold on to envy, you will never be content. If you hold on to betrayal, you'll never trust again. But if you hold on to God, you have the miraculous ability to forgive and to live free. You can be filled with contentment. You can be filled with joy. You can be confident. You can be filled with trust, and you can learn to trust even when your circumstances don't see it that way. Instead of running, when we start to say, where's Jesus? In my disappointment, in my pain, in my circumstances, where is Jesus? What are you holding on to? Even when life stinks and is weird and you don't understand it, guess what happens? You grow into him. You become more Christ-like. God is working behind the scenes, and you can hold on to him even when your situation says that you can't. Her initial decision to flee made her situation worse. Her ability to try to take things into her own hands made her situation worse. And she held on to things just like we do. You know, she held on to things like her own strength, her great husband, her great kids, her great house, her great life, her Disney passes, her beach days. Not that those aren't great things, but her all-together life. And she held on to her fear. She held on to her fear of famine when her circumstances looked bad, but God wasn't done with her. It's safe to say that Naomi didn't have great expectations that God would somehow turn things around, but he did anyhow. Because, see, it was God who took away the famine and opened a way home. In verse 22 says, they arrived in Bethlehem as the barley harvest was beginning. Now, this is a favorable and opportune time. This is the time. Look at this. She went from famine to barley season. She went from famine to barley season. This is like thinking you're going to starve to death and coming back home to all you can eat Chick-fil-A chicken nuggets with Chick-fil-A sauce, okay? This is from famine to, I'm sorry I just put that in your brains. It's Sunday and they're closed, but go tomorrow. And here's the thing about barley, okay? When it's planted, you don't see what's going to happen right away. Come on, plant moms. You don't see what's coming up right away. But here's the thing. At some point, if you stick it out, if you keep on going in the right direction, if you remember to water those plants, at some point you stick it out and you hold on to God, that thing is going to be coming up through the ground. God is working behind the scenes on your behalf. He is. And I can promise you that. All you have to do is hold on tightly to him. You may feel like none of your plans have worked out and that life hasn't turned out to be anything that you expected it to be, but that doesn't mean that God isn't working. You may feel like you're ready to give up, like you can't keep your head above water, but God is working on your behalf. You may feel like he's not, but he is. When Naomi felt like God had forgotten about and abandoned her, he was laying the groundwork to bless her, her nation, and humanity through what she thought was disappointment. If you are tempted to get stuck in your disappointment and stuck in your circumstances, here's what I want to remind you. God is doing something. He's working on your behalf. God is at work in the worst of times. And Saskia, can you come help me out? Here's the thing. Now that she's back in the right place, moved out of the place that she shouldn't have been in the first place, she is now actually in the perfect position to discover what God might want to do. So if you started out full and you find yourself empty here this morning, look at what direction you're facing and what you are holding on to, because God may want to bless you in Bethlehem, but you've got to get out of Moab. Don't hold on to God. Hold on to God. Don't hold on to Moab. Don't run to Moab. Check out what God did for her later on in this story, a complete 180. Ruth goes on to marry Boaz, and they have a son, and the word says a son has been given to Naomi. It doesn't say his son has been given to Ruth. It says his son has been given to Naomi. Now, that's a whole other message in and of itself, okay? Go and read it. But this baby, Obed becomes the father of Jesse. Jesse becomes the father of David, who led Israel to her greatest heights of glory. This is King David and part of the lineage of Jesus Christ. What would she have done differently if in her disappointment she knew what God was doing? What would you say if in your disappointment you knew what God was doing? You knew what he was up to. You knew he was up to something good. What would you say if you knew that in your situation it would lead you to knowing Jesus more intimately? What if it meant your family being restored? What if it meant healing coming to your home, coming to your body? If you just chose to hold on to him, and let me summarize it with this. God's big plans exceed our big disappointments every time. Every time. 3 chapters earlier, Naomi felt all she felt was disappointment and emptiness. But that didn't mean God wasn't working. Don't stay stuck in the bitterness of Moab when God wants to bless you in Bethlehem. So what about you? What are you holding on to today, right now? What are you holding on to? Who are you holding on to, and who are you choosing to grow into? Imagine what your life would look like if you chose to run to Jesus when famine hit your life. What would your day-to-day look like if you chose to get the heck out of Moab? What would it look like? Imagine if you clung to Jesus in your times of need and grew more to be like him, because he is working behind the scenes on your behalf, and we need to hold on to him. So God, we honor you and we worship you in this place today. Father God, I thank you that you have a plan and a purpose for our lives. God, I thank you that you don't leave us alone in disappointment. But Father, I pray that in this time, God, when we are feeling disappointment, when we are feeling hurt, when we are feeling pain, God, would we go to you? Would we know, Jesus, that you are working behind the scenes on our behalf, Father, and I pray that we would get the heck out of Moab, Father, and come running to you and hold tightly onto you in this place. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor Heather. Pastora Heather. That was amazing. Yeah. Church, this week we have a challenge. Don't hold on to things that we know we shouldn't, but let's grab God's hand. Sorry, English, and it's past noon. I need to eat. Let's just focus on Jesus and follow him. And as we do that, I have something to tell you. Is that we have coffee outside, and for the ladies, we have K-Pops for you. And there is also a special announcement for 2 ladies here because we have flowers that we want to give away, and these are beautiful flower pots that you can adopt and take care of them. And the winners are, okay, we didn't practice enough. The winners are Marcy Verdwin. That's number 1. And number 2. We have Charlene Cunningham. Congratulations, ladies. You have a flower pot waiting for you outside. Let's stand on our feet. We are going to dismiss. And don't forget to take your picture outside. Father, thank you so much for this day, for the message that we just received, and for the amazing things that you have for us. Your plans are better than any big disappointment that we had. Thank you guys for watching us online. We'll see you next Sunday. God bless you.